Mack, Worley III.
Hello, everyone. It is great to be back with you. So, just so everyone knows, we are trying to fix some technical problems that we've had. We're switching over to a new system now. I got a whole new setup here. Everything is tremendously different than it has been in the past. So, if you guys experience any technical difficulties, feel free to hit me up on Facebook. That's facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow, and let me know if you're having any issues. And also you can let us know in the chat room as well. But first and foremost, I just want to greet everybody. Hey, Mack Pack. I've missed you a lot. I really have. First of all, I'm Mack Worley III. This is On the Move. This is the show that attempts to inspire you all to stand up for your rights. And I think it's really important that we all take a moment today and really reflect on what rights we are fighting for, what we're actually doing. There's a battle going on right now in this country, and it really has a lot to do with, over-policing, but at the same time, people reacting to policing that is not against the law. It's not something that was too far. There are cases, and we're going to go over those today, that have happened recently in the news, and, hey, let me know in the chat room if you guys can hear me or not. Right now I've switched things up a little bit here. Of course this happens. This always happens. Live radio. It works. Oh, you can hear us. Okay, there we go. Every time I switch something up and try to do something different, it'll work in pre-show, and then it will fail tremendously when we're live on the air. That's just the way things work. It's live radio. So, anything can happen on live radio. Anyway, guys, so what we're saying here is there's a lot of things that are going on. People are saying that it's racism, or that there's something in our police departments that is systemic, and people are targeting minorities. I don't think that is an issue today. And even though I've seen cases where there was over policing, I've seen plenty of cases where people should not have been targeted, should not have been harassed. I also don't believe that it is a racial issue, although racial tensions are now higher than they have ever been before. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get into all this a little later, but as of right now, I just want to say we're going to give a little overview what's on the menu for today. I'm really excited about today's show. So, first of all, today is December 7th, 2014, and today's show is titled Constitutional Sheriff Richard Mack, and he will be our guest today. Today is episode 52. All right, so first thing on the menu, I want to talk a little bit about Pearl Harbor, because today is I believe the 73rd anniversary of the Japanese attack on our Navy installation in Hawaii. So I feel like it's pretty important that we cover that today. Then after that, I want to move into our weekly Defender segment that we have. Around 5:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, that's 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be joined by special guest Sheriff Richard Mack. And Richard Mack, I'll give you a little overview on who he is in case you don't know. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a former sheriff. Richard Mack has served in a wide variety of roles over the course of his nearly 20-year career in law enforcement, which began in Provo, Utah. Sheriff Mack began his career with the Provo Police Department as a parking enforcement cadet while attending BYU. A couple years later, he began full-time employment as an officer and was soon promoted to corporal, sergeant, and detective. After nearly 11 years at the Provo PD, Mack decided to return to his childhood turf in Arizona and run for Graham County Sheriff. His campaign took off and he was elected in 1988. He was sheriff for 2 terms until 1997. He was named Elected Official of the Year by Arizona-New Mexico Coalition of Counties in 1994, received the NRA Law Enforcement Officer of the Year, inducted into the NRA Hall of Fame. In 1995, he won the Cicero Award, the Samuel Adams Leadership Award for Local Sovereignty Coalition, and Gun Owners of America Defender of the Second Amendment Award. During his tenure, federal officers informed the sheriffs of the state that they would be required to enforce the so-called Brady Bill and run background checks at their expense under the law. In 1994, Mack and 6 other officers, sheriffs from across the country, challenged the constitutionality of the Brady Bill and ultimately fought it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, where they won a monumental decision for freedom. 3 years later, in a landmark 5-4 decision based on the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, Mack won his case. A graduate of the FBI National Academy, some of Mack's positions include patrol officer, undercover narcotics officer, hostage negotiator, youth officer, school resource officer, communications supervisor, corporal, front desk sergeant, detective, sheriff, search and rescue supervisor, jail administrator, and DARE instructor. Mack has been a consultant on numerous cases regarding police abuse, brutality, and other misconduct by public officials. He has joined with other members of law enforcement community to speak out in favor of drug policy reform. A graduate of Birmingham Young University, Mack lives with his wife in Fredericksburg, Texas. During the past 2 years, Sheriff Mack has been a speaker at more than 70 different Tea Party rallies all across the nation, ranging all the way from Honolulu to Bangor, Maine. Mack has supported this noble movement because it is both effective and peaceful. We are really, really excited to have him on the show today. Honestly, guys, I am super excited. I'm nuts about it. So, today I'm going to talk with Sheriff Mack, and him and I, we're going to talk about all sorts of different things. But some of the topics we're going to cover is American policing, what he thinks that the state of policing is today, because this seems to be such a big controversy with everything going on with Ferguson and Eric Gardner and so much more that, that's going on in our communities. We're being told that there's a real problem in the police community. And I would really like to hear it from Sheriff Mack, get his take on it. And, there's a bunch of other topics that we're going to get to as well. So you guys don't want to miss this episode. It is going to be awesome. I'm so excited. Anyway, you guys can join the conversation today, and I really hope that you do. The number to the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that is 619-924-0986. Or you can email us at talk@onthemoveshow.com, and we'll read your emails live on the air. So if you have another topic you'd like to discuss, you have something for myself or Sheriff Mack, please feel free to either call us or email us, and we'll read your emails or let you have your 2 cents. Anyway, we're about to cut to our first commercial break, but before we do, I want to ask you guys if you could please go to our website, onthemoveshow.com, or go to our Blog Talk Radio. If you actually go to our website on Blog Talk Radio and follow us, blogtalkradio.com/onthemoveshow. You can check us out on facebook.com/onthemoveshow, youtube.com/onthemoveshow. We got a bunch of original content on there, lots of stuff, not just the podcast. And you can also follow us on twitter.com/onthemoveshow. And before we cut to a quick commercial break, I just want to talk a little bit about the Oath Keepers really fast, guys. I've been contacted by the Oregon Oath Keepers, and, I just wanted to plug these guys a little bit and have you guys check out the Oregon Oath Keepers website. That's oroathkeepers.com. You can check them out. If you guys want to get involved, you want to become a member, feel free. If you guys want to donate to the cause, if it's something that you support, please do. I know they would definitely appreciate it. They run off of donations and membership fees. So what you do to help them will ultimately help the cause. And, I would really appreciate it if you guys would at least check them out. Anyway, guys, we're about to cut to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LAGOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III. Stand up, speak out, and get on the move. And now your host, Mack Worley III.
And we're back. I appreciate you all sticking with us. All right, we have Sheriff Mack on the line, and we're going to go ahead and take this call here and put him on. Hey, Mr. Mack, you there?
I am here.
Hey, first of all, I just want to say I'm a huge fan, and more than anything, I just want to say that I'm really honored to have you on the show. Thank you so much for cutting out some of your time out of your busy schedule for us.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I would make one little correction. It's Provo, Utah.
Oh, is that did I say Provo?
Yeah. Provo.
Okay.
But it's Provo. It's on both sides. But that's all right. If you haven't been to Utah and haven't been around there, then you're the second person lately that I've heard here say it that way. And I thought, well, I'll just let Mac know that it's Provo.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, I sure do appreciate it. I messed that one up. So
no, actually, that was a great introduction. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, that was off of your guys' website. And actually, I want to talk a little bit about the CSPOA. Now, what does that stand for again? It's Constitutional Sheriff Peace Officer Association. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. And every one of your listeners and followers can become members. In fact, we're the same as Oath Keepers. The only way that we keep our head above water financially is with people making donations and joining. And any citizen can join for $35 a year, and that's less than $3 a month. And
yes,
and any former military or former law enforcement can join for $25 a year. So it's vital that we have members and new members joining all the time. And I totally wish that we were funded. I wish some rich guy would just send us $1.5 million so that we could be much more effective. And I'm going to tell your listeners, if we were funded, there would be no stopping the potential that we can do. And you can see some of the things that we've done recently. It's now going viral. The sheriff who was the CSPOA Sheriff of the Year last year is David A. Clark Jr. from Milwaukee, and a video that we put out on him at our conference with Stuart Rhodes and several other sheriffs on December 17th, Constitution Day, in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club. The speech that Sheriff Clark gave has had over almost 1.5 million hits.
Wow.
And so I really recommend that everybody get that. We have the video here. You can order the video from us and get the speech from Stuart, myself, Chris Ann Hall, Michael Peruka, Sheriff Sam Page from North Carolina, Sheriff Mike Carpinelli from New York. We actually have some sheriffs in New York and California, Northern California, that are fighting and standing for the Second Amendment and trying to do what's right. And it's been really gratifying to see this movement have sheriffs that are standing so strongly, and especially in bigger states and as big a jurisdiction as Sheriff Clark's jurisdiction in Milwaukee. he happens to be a very good friend of mine. I call him my dark-complected brother. He is the only black sheriff in all of Wisconsin. He is a member, and he's in the CSPOA Hall of Fame. And he's a fantastic man, a great speaker. And again, anybody who would like to get that DVD, it's only $10. You can get that off our website at cspoa.org. And it's one of the best speeches I've ever heard Stuart Rhodes give also. So it's he's been on Fox News lately, and his Sheriff Clark has, and his speech is something that every American should hear. And at the beginning of course, his speech, you'll see the logo of the CSPOA. So we're really proud of him. We're proud of the work he's doing. And if you want to hear one of the best speeches anywhere in the country, you want to get that from Sheriff Clark. It's on YouTube, or you can just, like I say, get our video so you can hear everybody's speech from that amazing day.
Yes, sir. And, I have to say that the CSPOA, the whole idea, the concept of it, I think is got to be the most vital thing that we can be doing right now in our country. The oath that you guys take to uphold and defend the Constitution, and this is both from former law enforcement and current sheriffs and other peace officers. I think this is really the tip of the spear. We need to have this kind of involvement with the police departments and everything. These guys are the people that are out there enforcing these laws, and I can't say how much respect I have for a police officer who refuses to follow an unlawful order or a unconstitutional order. The mere thought, them actually even just having that thought process of like, well, let me see, before I enforce this law, is this law constitutional? I think that is something that hasn't been taught lately, and I think it's such an important thing that your organization is doing, is to making people actually start to think that way, who are the ones that are out there enforcing these laws. So as far as some of the things that you guys have done and that you're working on right now, what are some other things that you guys have in the works?
Well, the most miraculous and historical event is going to happen this coming Wednesday. And because of what we have been doing, and just exactly what you just said and alluded to, was sheriffs are now starting to pay attention to this, and even deputies are. And we had a deputy who was the only deputy sheriff of the year for the CSPOA in the 4 years we've been around and doing this. Sheriff Deputy Stan Lennick from Albany actually refused to arrest or expel or kick out a couple of people who were handing out flyers in the Albany airport. And the airport authority told Deputy Lennick to arrest him and get rid of him. And Deputy Lennick refused, and he said, they're not doing anything wrong. And that's on YouTube as well, how he stood by and defended the rights of the individual against government. And we're really proud of what he did, and we named him Deputy Sheriff of the Year. And that needs to happen all the time. And this is exactly what we're talking about at CSPOA and Oath Keepers. Tell your supervisors you're not going to violate the rights of the constitutional rights, the God-given rights of Americans who you are trying to police. The most important thing in police work is to protect the God-given rights of American citizens. And that's what is going on in our country. And so now we have a caravan of sheriffs from all across the country, and CSPOA actually didn't even put this on. It just so happens that the sheriffs who are sponsoring it and organizing it are members of the CSPOA. And Sheriff Tom Hodson from Massachusetts started this whole thing, and they invited me to participate and CSPOA to participate. But sheriffs from all over the country are getting together in Washington, D.C., to tell Congress and the President that we oppose his unilateral dictatorial order to grant amnesty to 5 or 6 million illegal aliens. And so we're going there, one, to do a symbolic gesture of saying, you know what, you guys are making our jobs more difficult. Why don't you talk to us before you start making stupid laws and stupid executive orders, and executive orders have no more law to them than if the local shoeshine boy did it, because the President of the United States has no authority to make laws. He cannot make laws. Right after the preamble of the Constitution, the very first rule is that Congress, that all legislative power shall be vested in a Congress. And so let's see, how much legislative authority is vested in Congress? All legislative authority is vested in Congress. So the Supreme Court cannot make law. The Supreme Court cannot make the Obamacare a tax either. They cannot make taxes. They cannot make law. The only thing that the Supreme Court could have done is passed it back to Congress and said, this would be constitutional if you made it a tax, but I cannot declare a law a tax if you did not make it one. And
yes,
so
sir.
Roberts was out to lunch on that too. But the most important thing we have going right now with the CSPOA is that we're supporting the sheriff caravan to Washington, D.C. And I'll be the first one to admit it's mostly symbolic, but I'm telling you, it's huge symbolism. It's huge when sheriffs from all over the country go to Washington to tell Congress, straighten up, obey the Constitution, and protect the citizens. And when you want to make laws that affect all of us, come talk to us first before you do these kind of stupid things.
Absolutely. You know, I could not agree more with you. First and foremost, obviously, the president, he's an executive. His only job is to enforce the laws on the books. He's not authorized and has no power at all granted to him to make laws or create laws or change laws. Right. And I mean, this Obamacare thing, this has got to be the biggest problem right now. The biggest issue with constitutional overstep with, he's changed the law so many times. He's done all this stuff, and then obviously our judicial branch, which by the way, I think is probably the most seditious thing that we have right now that is happening, because the judicial branch, that's the branch of government that is least accountable to the people. People don't have any say in whether or not these judges in the Supreme Court, these 9 judges are there. They don't even vote them. They can't vote them out of power. They can't even impeach them unless through grassroots support of forcing their representatives to start an impeachment process, which is not even something they can do unless there's a crime that has actually happened, some kind of violation of the law. So this is a very, very systemic problem that we're going to see happening more and more. We're told that there's no such thing as a slippery slope, but we see it every day. That's the platform of the progressive, platform of the Progressive Party. But as far as the federal government's reach, they're supposed to have a really small role in our lives, and we see that has grown quite a bit. What do you think that the federal government's role was meant to be?
Well, it's pretty obvious. Just read Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And you're absolutely correct. The Constitution was devised for one primary purpose, and that was to keep government in check, to keep government impotent, and to keep government small. So if you read the entire Constitution, there's about, maybe 30, 32, maybe 33 things that it allows, powers and responsibilities, I shouldn't say things, powers and responsibilities granted or delegated to the federal government. Now, the key component of that is if you look at the 10th Amendment, and it says delegated. And that begs a question. If powers were delegated to Congress and to the federal government, who were the people who delegated that to the federal government? Who delegated those 33 powers, and specifically about 17 or 18 in Article 1, Section 8, where it says what the federal government can and cannot do? Who did that? I mean, it literally says delegated. Well, only a boss can delegate something to somebody. If you don't have the authority to delegate to me, I don't have to do what you say. For instance, if I work for Walmart and the manager of Kmart wants to delegate something to me, obviously I'm not going to listen to him because I don't work for him. And it's the same thing with the federal government. They don't have any authority, but if we start listening to them, they're going to do it. But who was it that delegated properly, lawfully, and constitutionally the powers that the 10th Amendment is talking about? Well, that was the original 13 states and we the people. Mm-hmm. And so then you pretty much have to know, if you read and understand history, that we did not, the states did not, the people did not create a federal government, a new central government that would be in charge of every facet of our lives. Quite the contrary. It says that they only have, and you can read my Supreme Court decision, which bears this out and reinforces this principle of the Constitution, that the federal government only has discrete enumerated powers. And my decision is very emphatic in making sure that we all understand that the way we keep the federal government within its constitutional, discrete, and enumerated powers is that we must exercise and assert the 10th Amendment. And then that begs the other question, who's in charge of enforcing the 10th Amendment? And who's in charge of enforcing state sovereignty? And that goes right back again to we the people and the states who originally delegated to the federal government its powers. And if we delegate powers to them and they don't do them, we can certainly take them back and do them ourselves or delegate them to someone else, because the boss can delegate to whomever he wants. And so the federal government has one job and one job only, and that first and foremost is, just as the Declaration of Independence says, quote, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Well, which rights was it talking about? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the federal government has now taken over a role that was never theirs to be in charge of, and that is to make sure that we're all equal. Well, they're supposed to guarantee equal opportunity, but not guarantee equality for each one of us, especially financial equality, which is exactly what the communist in the White House is trying to do. And the federal government has taken over a role that was never theirs, and we've got to take it back. And in my Supreme Court decision, it says that a healthy balance of power between the states and the federal government will reduce the risk of tyranny and abuse from either front. I recommend that everybody read that case, because the Supreme Court did not try to make law in my case. All they did was reinforce the Constitution and the 10th Amendment. And so everybody needs to read that. It's the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in the history of our country. And you can get a lot of that out of my books. My books talk about that, and Are You a David is my most recent book. Don't you love that title? Are You a David?
Yes, sir.
So anyway, there's so much going on today, and I'm just really proud of the sheriffs that are standing this event in Washington. We've already got several meetings with congressmen who are now making sure that they're listening. And to get a meeting with congressmen, in fact, we've got about 20 or 30 congressmen lined up to meet with us personally, and then others that we're going to go meet with in some other impromptu meetings. But we've been scheduling meetings with congressmen and senators for the past 2 or 3 months. And, I don't hold out a lot of hope in Washington, D.C., but if they would stop doing just a few things and stay within their constitutionally prescribed limitations, it could really bode well for a lot of people, and farmers and ranchers who are being attacked by the BLM, and people who are being unjustly attacked by the IRS. This is where we really want to focus some of our energy on the 10th, as well as the lack of security at the border. But I really believe that there should be a review of everybody that's in federal prison, especially that the IRS put in prison. And there should be a review of every one of those cases. And I believe if people did the right thing in high places, that 99% of the people in prison from the IRS would be set free. This is a national atrocity. It's an absolute shame. The IRS has the reputation of a Gestapo organization. They're completely outside the law, and we need to address that. And I can't believe that we still profess to be a free country, and we have an organization in our country known as the Internal Revenue Service. So we have a lot to cover. We have a lot to do, and the CSPOA is doing this. And I'll ask every one of your listeners real quickly, what sheriff do you want in your county? Do you want the sheriff that will allow the IRS and EPA and FDA and many other federal bureaucracies, BLM? Do you want a sheriff that's going to allow them to come in and do whatever they want to you and to your neighbors? Or do you want a sheriff like Sheriff Clark and Sheriff DeMayo and Sheriff Brad Rogers and Sheriff Glenn Palmer, many other sheriffs across the country, Sheriff Nick Finch from Liberty County, Florida? Do you want a sheriff who will stand and be a buffer and stand in the way and make sure that if the federal government's coming after you, all their I's are dotted, their T's are crossed, and every due process is being followed, and probable cause has been achieved before they take you and your property? So which sheriff do you want? If you want the sheriff who will stand and keep his oath, then I ask you to join us in this holy cause. Become a member of the CSPOA, make a donation, and make us stronger. Everybody that joins makes us stronger. There is strength in numbers, and there is. If you want us to keep going, then make a donation and become a member.
Wow. You know, Sheriff Mack, I have to say, I have so much respect for you. And those officers who were standing alongside you with the CSPOA. I already had a pretty good idea of who you were and a lot of the things that you represented. But, after hearing you speak, everything that you're saying is things that I've been screaming into this mic for, over a year now. And, honestly, everything's resonating with me a great deal. To the listeners out there, please go check out their website, cspoa.org, and, become a member, donate if you can. And, I think that this is a holy cause. This is something that we all need to get behind and support. It is really important. It's really important. Sheriff Mack, we have a caller. His name's Steve. He wants to ask you a few questions. Do you got some time to take some listener calls?
Oh, yeah, heck yeah.
All right, here we go. Hey, Steve, you're on with Sheriff Mack. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you. Hi, Sheriff Mack.
Hey, good evening.
I've been listening to the show so far, and it seems that your frustrations are really about the overpower of the federal government, which is limited under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. I think the biggest problem we got going on now that has to be curtailed is the very people outside in the states between Congress and Senate and our small towns that have their own agenda to give the power to the federal government under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, because those powers are only within the 10 square miles of D.C. unless legislatively given to them. And that's what we've got going on today, is we've got the people in the states that keep granting our federal government more and more power, and we've got to hold them accountable. One of my questions, I've got two questions. One of my questions would be, do the sheriffs have the power and authority to arrest our president and our Congress and our political representatives for treason or breach of oath? And secondly, you said that you are firmly against violating people's unalienable rights given to them by our Creator of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Hey, I like how you said that. You and I are about the only two that ever say that they're unalienable rights. Yeah, that's right. Actually the right pronunciation.
Yes. Yeah, they're not to be given away by any.
They can't be liened.
Anybody.
There's no lien. You can't put any lien on these.
Right. Now, the biggest travesty that's going on today, the biggest scam, as I would put it, is the right to travel. People traveling that are getting tickets for not having a driver's license,
right,
and license plate stickers because under Murdoch versus Pennsylvania, nobody is forced to have a license or pay a fee to exercise a liberty.
Yeah. Let me address the first question.
Okay.
The first question is, does the sheriff have the power and authority to arrest the president or members of Congress? And pragmatically, I would say absolutely not. Technically, I would say absolutely they do. Are they going to? Are you ever going to get a sheriff or a bunch of sheriffs together to do that? I wouldn't say in the very near future that's going to happen. I would say this, though. If you, and due process still has to be followed. And this is what I've had problem with people understanding on this question. I've dealt with this question quite a bit. And this is the way it goes. If you have any evidence that anyone in Washington, D.C. Has committed treason, then you still have to show how that applies to that particular sheriff's jurisdiction. That sheriff reigns supreme in law enforcement in his county and his county only. If other sheriffs get together and they want to make a bigger, paint it with a bigger brush, that's fine too. However, you must take your evidence to the sheriff and ask him to investigate the allegations that you're making. He can investigate it, or he can say, he can refuse to investigate it. But then that's where you come in and you put the pressure on him because the sheriff works for you. And if he hears from, hundreds of people saying, hey, why aren't you conducting this investigation? We're tired of living under this ridiculous, corrupt system. We want this investigated. And then you need to know something else. The sheriff, if he does the investigation, turns it over to a proper prosecutor, say county attorney or a DA or even the state attorney general. They have to be willing to prosecute. Somebody has to prosecute it. It cannot be that you, the sheriff, I'm talking about that the sheriff does his own prosecution. He can't. That would be against the law. So he has to turn it over to an independent prosecutor. Right now, I believe that having a sheriff do such an investigation would be that you would have to show that really there's some legitimate evidence there. Do I believe that the President of the United States has committed treason? Yes, I do, numerous times. I also believe that he's committed numerous high crimes and misdemeanors, several times. I mean, just with the Fast and Furious guns being transferred down to Mexico, and those guns being used in the commission of about 400 murders. Not just Agent Brian Terry of the Border Patrol, but numerous Mexican citizens were also killed with those guns. And the president got to skate on that whole thing because he declared executive privilege. And there's been lots of other crimes that have been committed, and his cover-up with Benghazi and his cover-up with the IRS scandal and the monies that have been misused and misappropriated through the IRS and many other agencies, and no accounting for many others, and giving bonuses to people in the IRS who actually were caught cheating on their taxes. When American citizens go to prison for that, they actually receive bonuses. So there's lots of places where he could be prosecuted, but the political courage just doesn't seem to be there. And Congress, of course, isn't doing their job, and now we have sheriffs that are going there and trying to convince them to do their jobs, and that they're making our jobs or the jobs of sheriffs in the country much more difficult. So pragmatically speaking, I don't think it's going to happen real soon, but I don't want to discourage any of you from going to your sheriff and saying, look, this guy has committed treason. You need to show how it affects your county, and ask the sheriff to investigate it.
Okay.
So, Steve, did you have any other questions for Sheriff Mack?
Sure. That being what he kind of a rebuttal to what he just said here, do you think, Sheriff Mack, that our current court systems, which are not common law or court of record, they are statutory district courts of territories, in my opinion. I'll give it my opinion because I'm not claiming I profess any more knowledge than somebody else, but our court systems are corrupt. And we live under a democracy which is not ran by the common law. A democracy is ran by the majority of rule.
Right.
Do you think that it would have? Do you think you would have more power if we were able to get a common law court again under a republic?
Well, the way they're going about the common law courts right now is completely backwards, and it's not working, and it will not work. And the people in charge of these common law grand juries have really missed the boat in numerous different ways. And they've given a lot of people some false hope and false sense of security. And, in fact, I got a call about it this evening. And they said, hey, a common law grand jury or citizen grand jury issued an indictment against the peace officers in New York who choked that man to death. And that's fine, but what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It absolutely means nothing. It's worthless, and these people are wasting so much time and effort and resources on something that has no historical backing for the way they're doing this. So I'm not against a common law grand jury, but it has to be done right, and so far it's not. And it also has to be that it's part that it actually represents more people than it does at this point. We the people establish this country, and we the people must establish common law grand juries, and it has to have a independent investigator. It cannot work without sheriffs, and it cannot work without an independent prosecutor. And until those things are in place, this isn't going to work.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
So, Sheriff Mack, we have to cut to a quick commercial break. When we get back, do you have time to stick around? And I'd like to talk a little bit about the state of police right now with in regards to like the Eric Gardner situation in Ferguson. I'd like to get your opinion on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll be right back, everybody. Don't go anywhere.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III. Stand up, speak out, and get on the move. And now your host, Mack Worley III.
All right, we're back. When we last left, we were talking with Sheriff Richard Mack. He's the constitutional sheriff. He's over at the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officer Association. Check out his website, cspoa.org. You can get involved in their program, their organization, help them out by donating, continue the cause of trying to get more information and education to constitutional peace officers and sheriffs out there. This has got to be one of the most important things that we can all do. So please take the time to get involved, help them out. Additionally, if you guys would like to have a word with Sheriff Mack, or if you have a question for myself, please feel free to give us a call. The number to the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that's 619-924-0986. And we're on with Sheriff Mack again. So, sir, I just I want to ask you a couple questions in regards to what you see today and what you've seen in the past during your time as a sheriff. Was racial profiling or racial tensions or racial motivated arrests, was that something that you saw prevalent during your time in law enforcement?
Yeah, no, there was never any racial profiling. In fact, if they ever caught you doing anything like that, you were in big time trouble. And if I ever caught any of my deputies doing any such thing, they would have been fired. We didn't tolerate anything like that. No way.
Yes, sir.
And I will tell you this: it's not happening today either.
Mm-hmm.
Darren Wilson, Officer Darren Wilson of Ferguson, Missouri, was not hoping that he was going to get a chance to kill a black teenager or a black man. He was not. He was not glad that he did it. I still question some of the things he has said since then. First of all, if I was his lawyer, the last thing I would do is have him talk to Stephanopoulos on ABC News.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way I would have him talk to anyone about this case. And another thing that Officer Wilson should have done is reach out to the Brown family and apologize. Yes, apologize. This is the nightmare that a lot of officers, including myself, always had. And that is shooting someone where you're going to be second-guessed, and especially if that person is unarmed. Are there times when you could legitimately shoot someone who is unarmed? Of course. But that is still the most difficult case to live with. I could never live with that. Now, if somebody is killing your wife or my wife or about ready to kill a kid or my granddaughter or grandson, that's an easy one. They're about to kill you or me, and I stop that. They have a knife or a gun or whatever. That's easy. I'm not going to second guess that. I'm not going to have nightmares about that. But when an assailant is not armed, I would always be thinking, what else could I have done? And there's a lot worse things than the officer going home at night, and that's what officers are trained to do. Whatever you have to do to go home at night, and that's officer safety tactics. And I will tell you that Officer Wilson did not speak correctly when he talked about this case and when he pursued after Michael Brown without waiting for backup. That's going to come back to haunt him. And he did not follow strict police protocol. And I'll be the first one to admit that in such a volatile situation that he found himself in and how dangerous a situation he found himself in, I know that adrenaline takes over and people can make mistakes, and I think he did make a couple of mistakes. But there is no way that he murdered this man with intent to kill someone because of the color of his skin. That is absolutely ridiculous. And the worst thing that has happened is that we have a group of people in America who have actually now committed all sorts of arson, all sorts of crimes, all sorts of looting, even assaults and attempted murder in Ferguson and other places. And I think it's astonishing that gets support from some of our national leaders. I find that so horrendous and pathetic and disgraceful and despicable. These actions afterwards, every one of those people should be charged inciting a riot or being part of a riot, and I don't care if it's 10,000 or 15,000, they should all be arrested, they should all be prosecuted, and I don't care if it takes 2 or 3 years to do it all. Go after these people and teach these people a lesson. This is horrendous what they have done, and they're all a bunch of thugs. And where are their parents? Where are the parents of these kids that are out there doing all this? And you know what? This is a breakdown of our society, and these people showing just absolutely what no class they have, and no personal pride, and no honor, and that they're making these two killings an excuse to commit these types of crimes against innocent people. They don't want innocent people shot? Then don't go burn somebody's house down or their business down who is completely innocent and not involved in any of this. That just is ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yeah. As far as that, I've had so many conversations of people who, they call themselves patriots or rights activists, and it's so surprising to me that some of them get caught up on the side of these rioters, and it really does surprise me, because when you're siding with people that are destroying private property, hurting people, rioting, damaging, vandalizing, stealing things, looting, that's a human right. We all have these rights to property, to be, secure, to not be harassed, these kind of things, and not be harmed, especially too. They're throwing Molotov cocktails on buildings and burning them down. Who knows if somebody's in it when they're doing that? But yes. I want to talk specifically, about Darren Wilson. Obviously he was a younger officer. I agree that perhaps he made some mistakes, but in terms of use of force, I was security forces in the military. I have been trained with a use of force model. There are certain situations when I'm allowed to use force. There are certain situations when I'm not allowed to use force. And it says, if they're at this level of threat, at this threat level, I can use this tactic in conjunction with it. So let's say they're passive resistance. The most I can use is maybe pain compliance, where I'm twisting or hitting pressure points or something like that. But I can't sit there and punch him in the face, And in terms of my use of force model, and I'd like to find out what yours is in a moment here, but my use of force model is if I felt that there was a threat that could result in seriously bodily harm or even death, then I was authorized to use deadly force. As far as a Darren Wilson situation,
every peace officer is the same.
Yes, sir. And as far as the justification, all you have to do is be able to articulate why you felt that there was this threat that could result in serious bodily harm or death. And as far as Darren Wilson, this kid, Michael Brown, he's charging at him. He'd already caved in his eye socket, tried to grab his gun in the first place. It went off in the car, and then he's charging at him. This guy's 292 pounds.
He didn't cave in his eye socket. There's photographs to show that didn't happen. It is true that he took some shots to the face. Mike Brown did hit him in the face, but whether he did that or not, but no, he did not have Officer Wilson did not have a fractured eye socket.
Really? Okay. Yeah, I was looking at reports on that. So that has come out.
Well, that was first reported. It was originally reported, but the recent photographs right at the hospital show bruising and abrasions on his cheeks.
Okay.
But no eye socket. That didn't happen. But regardless, we know he was being attacked by Mike Brown. No question.
Yeah.
That did happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. So and then he grabbed the gun, and it went off in the car. So we already know that this kid, Michael Brown, is prepared to grab the officer's gun. So if he did manage to tackle this officer, get him on the ground, maybe he could get control of his gun and shoot him with it. Who knows?
As far as the statistic, there's about, and I can't remember what it is, but I think it's about 15-20% of officers killed with a gun in the line of duty are killed with their own guns.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So
that's not unheard of.
As far as your use of force module or what you guys had, what was your protocol or the things that you guys went off to determine what level of force you were going to use?
Well, and you said it, and now nowadays, and this still hasn't been addressed very well. Did he have a taser? Did he have mace? And why didn't he deploy those if he did? And I'd be really surprised in today's day and age that Officer Wilson wouldn't have had some of these other tools available to him. Mm-hmm. Police departments make use of these. They make them available to their officers. And why weren't they deployed? That's never been properly addressed. I haven't heard that explained, and Officer Wilson hasn't explained them very well. But this is the thing. There was a time during this entire incident where Michael Brown was leaving and going away from Officer Wilson. Officer Wilson says he gave chase, and he had already asked for backup, and Stephanopoulos asked, why did you keep going after him? He said, that's what I was trained to do. And right there, that is the part where I say that's going to be used against him. Because not waiting for backup, that's one of the first things you do. And, in fact, backup was on its way. We don't know how what its ETA was, how soon it was going to be there. But an officer by himself in that kind of a situation, heck no. I am waiting for backup. There's no way
sir.
in that situation I'm going to try to act like John Wayne and go after this guy by myself.
Yes,
no
sir.
way.
So as far as your take on the current state of American policing, do you think that there's any kind of systemic problems right now that really need to be addressed, as far as
yes.
what you're seeing
yes.
right now?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's far too much on officer safety and taking care of yourself. And I believe what the gist of your show is that if we were dedicated to our oath of office, dedicated to freedom, putting freedom first, understanding that I am a guard of liberty, that I myself as a patrol officer, as a peace officer in my community, that my first and utmost duty and responsibility is to protect life, liberty, and property, that my job is to protect the rights of every individual that I encounter on the streets, instead of being this ticket-writing fool and a tax collector for the county or the city, that I'm actually a public servant, that I am an officer keeping the peace in my community. That's where we have missed the boat. Our officers have not been trained in constitutional precepts. We have not been trained in the ethical application of the oath of office. We have not been trained in American ideals and what we're really for. And officers are, inculcated and maybe even brainwashed into believing and hoping that they can put every drug dealer and drug user in prison and make the big haul and take all the asset forfeiture and all this stuff and then use it for their own police department's budget. Mm-hmm. All of those things are wrong and immoral. The drug war has taken our police off on some tangent that we were never supposed to go on. And so, we as the law enforcement community need to stop pointing fingers at judges and legislatures for making everything horrible. We need to clean our own act. We need to wipe our own noses. We need to get back to true public service through the prism of the oath of office and our constitutional obligations. If we reteach that, if we start over, the solution to this is not if we move forward. The solution to all of this, in any of the problems that we're facing in our country today, is behind us. We must move to find those solutions in our history, in our culture, and in our Constitution and Declaration of Independence. If we look for the solutions there, we're going to find something significant that will really help and get this country back on track.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Go back to our roots, what this country was founded on.
Yeah.
And, I want to kind of go back a little bit to the beginning of this conversation here. You were talking about how you were involved in a symbolic act. But I just want to point out to our listeners that, even though an act may be symbolic, that doesn't take away from its importance. I just want to point out the fact that
it might still be very effective.
Exactly. Yeah. The Declaration of Independence itself was an act of symbolism. So
it is. It's not a law. The Declaration of Independence is not a law.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, and we saw how big of an impact that had. So the things that the CSPOA are doing right now, some are symbolic, some are actual, legal battles that are going to change presidents and things like that. So regardless of what action you guys are taking, I am just so thankful that you guys are out there doing it, and I hope you continue to do it. Before we move on to the next segment, sir, I would just like to know, if you were going to give advice to a new police officer, somebody who just got out of the academy or something along those lines, what would it be?
I would advise him to read the Bill of Rights, memorize the Bill of Rights, or at least memorize each principle in each amendment of the first 10 amendments or the Bill of Rights. For instance, the First Amendment, there's 5 principles. Just tell me what those 5 principles are. And then just tell me if I ask you, what's the Fourth Amendment about? Well, illegal search and seizure, and that you have to have warrants. And, just tell me what each one is about. the right to speedy trial in the Sixth Amendment. And what about the Eighth and Ninth? The Eighth Amendment, especially, every peace officer in this country should know that excessive fines and excessive bail and cruel and unusual punishment are illegal in this country. And then why, officer, are you writing all these tickets that are excessive bail and fines? And so when you start seeing your role in these things and you start living them and putting them in your life and in your job, it's going to change the way you address your job. So first and foremost, understand your oath of office, memorize the Constitution, and stand and put liberty first in the application of your job. Don't ever forget, put your oath of office first. Put the liberty of the people you deal with first. Not your own track record, not your win and loss record in court. Put liberty first in every facet of your job, and you're going to be the best peace officer America has ever seen.
Yes, sir. Well, I just want to say, sir, thank you so much for joining us today, and it's been an absolute pleasure for me to even just talk to you. Thank you again, and for everybody out there, please go check out their website, cspoa.org, and thank you again, sir.
Okay, talk to you later, Mack. Thanks much.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
And at this point, guys, we're going to go ahead and cut to another commercial break. When we get back, we're going to cover some segments of the show that we didn't get to earlier in the day. I want to go over this day in history. I want to get a little bit of information out there about the Pearl Harbor anniversary that we're now in right now. Today is the 73rd anniversary. And I also want to go into the Weekly Defender. So don't go anywhere. You guys are going to enjoy this stuff. And then we're going to go into the Mack attack. And I really want to break down these Eric Gardner situations and, Michael Brown and compare the two, maybe talk a little bit about Trayvon Martin and kind of deep dive analyze all these situations and see how they interlink, and then talk about the greater state of, for example, law enforcement, government force, things along those lines. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LAGOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III. Stand up, speak out, and get on the move. And now your host, Mack Worley III.
And we're back. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody. So today is the 73rd anniversary of Pearl Harbor, the day that will live in infamy. And I think it's important that we take a moment to really talk about this. This show, it focuses a lot about your rights. I hope more than anything that we inspire you guys to stand up for your rights, learn about them, and then get out there and assert them. A right that goes unasserted is a right that you haven't used, first and foremost, But, we're told very, very often that, don't do this. For example, things like open carry. Don't open carry, because if you open carry, what you're going to do is make it illegal for us to open carry, because everybody's going to get all upset, and then there's going to be a law, and it will become illegal. What's the point of having the right to bear arms, the right to open carry a firearm for our self-defense, our protection, if by asserting that right can be taken away? What difference would that be between the right to pray? If praying in public could get that right taken away, what's the point of having the right to pray in public? What's the point of speaking freely or having the right to speak freely if by doing so you could lose that right? So I hope more than anything that we inspire you guys to assert your rights, learn more about your rights, and I think that's very important. But additionally, one big part of this show is history. And I want you guys to understand history. I want you to learn it with me. There's a lot. I mean, I have a passion for history. I'm very, very passionate about it. And I don't know everything, but what I do know is that I like to research, and I like to share the things that I research with you guys. So with that said, I want to just take a moment to play the speech from our president when the actual Japanese attack happened. It's Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and it's his Pearl Harbor address. And we're going to do that in the segment that we call This Day in History.
This Day in History.
Because people have got to know whether the president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Yesterday,
what our country can do for you.
December 7th, 1941.
And the people who knock these buildings down.
A date which will live in infamy.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. Japan has therefore undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
So, December 7th, 1941. 2,400 members of the United States military were killed in an unprovoked attack. And I'm going to do something here that is not recommended on radio, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to have a moment of silence for the lives lost during the attack on Pearl Harbor, and I ask that you guys participate in it with me. Here we go. Thank you. So for those of you who have served in the military, I just want to say thank you for your service. This day reminds me why it's important that we thank our veterans for the things that they've done for our country, the sacrifices they've made, and obviously think about the people who have died to preserve our freedoms. And who knows what would have happened if we would have lost World War II. I mean, we'd all probably be speaking German right now, and I certainly wouldn't be allowed to have a radio show that talks about asserting your rights. So, again, thank you for your service, members of the military. And anyway, we're going to move on to the next segment. The next segment of the show, we like to call it the Weekly Defender, and this is actually my favorite part of the show. So here we go.
And now it's time for the Weekly Defender. You have the right to defend your life, the right to defend your family, and the right to defend your freedom.
All right, this is a segment of the show where we report about armed citizens in the news who have used their firearms to defend their family, their property, and or themselves. Our first Weekly Defender we found in an article on WISH in Indianapolis, Indiana. A man entered a Cash American pawn in Indianapolis, Indiana. He pulled a hoodie over his head, drew a gun, and attempted to rob the store. A customer responded by drawing a gun and shooting the criminal, killing him. Following an investigation, police revealed that the deceased robber was a suspect in other robberies as well. This was on November 18th this year. Our next one we found on Alabama.com. The owner of a mechanic shop in Birmingham, Alabama, was sleeping at his business after repeated burglary attempts when a pair of criminals jumped a fence and came onto the property. The owner retrieved a gun, shot one intruder, then slapped the other, causing both to flee. The wounded burglar was captured while seeking medical treatment at a local hospital. So, I just want to talk a little bit about the importance of self-defense and, actual self-policing, all right? This is something that we have really had the wool pulled over our eyes. We've been told for a very long time that it's the police's job to protect ourselves, to protect us. And we should just call 911. We shouldn't get involved. We should just put our guns down and wait for the police to arrive, even though the police can take 30 minutes sometimes or longer, depending on where you're at. So this, I think, has been the biggest deception that we have been conned into believing. As far as like welfare, okay, this is no different than welfare, thinking that the government can provide everything for you. The government doesn't have the ability, first and foremost, to provide anything to anyone because everything it has stolen, it has coerced, it has robbed people sometimes at gunpoint. Every single bit of money that the government has belonged to someone else at one point or another. So the government can't provide for you. The government takes from your neighbor and gives to you, or steals from Paul to pay Peter. This is what the government is. And this deception of welfare is, I think, less of a deception than even the police factor. The police have become this omnipresent being where they're people assume that they're everywhere, that the police can protect you under every circumstance whatsoever, that they're never out of reach, when the reality of it is that not only are the police not everywhere, And not only do the police usually just show up to investigate after a crime has been committed, which I will not argue, that is a very important thing to do. That's a very important job to research so we capture criminals after an act has been done. That's extremely important. But the police also, and I say this all the time, if you're a member of the Mack Pack, if you are a weekly listener, you've heard me say this, beat this drum over and over, the police have absolutely no duty, no obligation to protect you. That is a Supreme Court ruling. The police don't have to protect you. So if they show up to a situation and the situation is too dangerous, much like the situation where Sheriff Mack and I were talking about with Darren Wilson, he didn't have an obligation. He had no obligation whatsoever to get out and pursue. That was a choice he made, but they have no obligation to stop any crimes from happening at all. Whatsoever. They can decide, it's too dangerous, I'm going to wait for backup, or I'm just going to wait until the situation resolves itself, which is a very common expression in police work. The situation will resolve itself. Eventually, whoever's committing the robbery will be gone, and I can enter investigative mode, or whoever's committing the murder will be gone, and I can enter investigative mode. This is a very common thought process in our police department. So I chose these events to illustrate how armed people in businesses, whether or not they're customers or owners, they can take actions to prevent criminals from turning them into victims. And in both of these cases that we just talked about in the Weekly Defender, it illustrated that. It empowered the citizens to protect themselves and not depend on police. Now, what's happening in the investigatory mode that the police enter is they're not trying to investigate the victim of this robbery, possibly being killed or things being stolen. Now they can just focus their attention on the criminal. And in fact, in this one case, this criminal was actually captured receiving treatment at a local hospital. That ultimately led to his arrest. So the actions from the mechanic in Birmingham, Alabama, the owner of the mechanic shop, actually him firing at this criminal resulted in the criminal being captured. I mean, that's amazing. So, I want to talk a little bit about the riots in Ferguson and everything like that in regards to what I'm talking about here as far as self-policing. And I think it's important that we address this, but there has been an open letter that I think discusses it quite well, and it was written by the Oath Keepers, and this is what they had to say. This is an open letter to the people of Ferguson from the Oath Keepers. We call on the veterans in your community, in particular, to stand up, lead the way to defend the lives and property of their neighbors. And we call on them to form neighborhood watches and patrols to put a stop to acts of violence. You have the power to police your own neighborhoods and keep them all safe. Black veterans have a proud and noble example to follow in the Deacons for Defense and Justice, who were World War II and Korean War veterans who stood up to the violence of the Klan. Except this time, you must defend against violence by anyone, whether outsiders or locals, of any race, against anyone of any race. If you take care of your own neighborhoods, it removes a sense of emergency that is used to justify a heavy police presence. And that can also have a lasting effect even after the protests are over. Be your own police. This is such an important topic to discuss, and I hope that you guys understand. I hope that you're following me here on this, because exactly what they're saying here, be your own police. There are long-lasting effects even after this. What we are seeing now, based on the protests, the investigations that are going on from Eric Holder, Attorney General Eric Holder, he's having the Justice Department move in to areas that have absolutely no federal jurisdiction. There's no reason why the feds should get involved to investigate what happened to Michael Brown. I mean, they've had a ton of autopsies now. They don't trust the local PD. What are they trying to accomplish? I would argue that the federal government right now is trying to federalize the police. Law enforcement all over the country, at some point or another, is not going to have its own jurisdictions if this trend continues. What we will see is a federal police, much like the DHS, but also we won't have our normal police departments. If this happens, if Obama and the progressives, if they manage to federalize the police, and I think that we're at the beginning stages of it right now, where they're getting involved in all these investigations. They keep sending, troops in to some areas like DHS and things along those lines, or where they're getting involved, creating a federal case out of a local situation. The 10th Amendment is very clear, and the Constitution is very clear in and of itself as well. The federal government only has the powers enumerated in the Constitution. That's it. And, as one of our listeners here pointed out, the Bill of Rights, this is not something that can be amended. 1 through 10, the First Amendment through the 10th Amendment, these are permanent contracts. These are requirements for the rest of the contract. If they start amending these other rights, it's null and void. These are permanent. These rights are innate. They're self-evident. Some may say they're granted by God. Others say they're human rights. Whatever you say, they do exist naturally. They're natural rights. No one can take those rights away. They are unalienable, meaning no one can put a lien on it, i.e. take it away. You can't even give it away. You can't say, you know what, this right to keep and bear arms, it's too much for me. I don't want that right. Go ahead and take that right away. I feel uncomfortable. Take it away. I don't want it. Here, I'll give it to you. You can't even do that. It's unalienable. That right will exist no matter what, because it's self-evident and it's a natural right. So with that said, we're talking about the federalization of the police force, all right? The federal government, as I said, they have very limited powers, and they're all granted in the Constitution. They can't just pull one out of thin air and say, you know what, today I think I have the power to write law as a president. It's nowhere enumerated in the Constitution as my powers, and in fact, it's very clear that Congress is the only people that have the right to pass laws. And I want you guys to really think about and understand the history and some of the reasoning behind the Constitution. I learned something the other day, and it really, every time I learn something new about our founders' reasoning, I'm just blown away. Every time I learn more about the Constitution, I'm more impressed with the men and women, men who created it. But the thing about it is, all right, there was a reason why all new taxes have to start in the House of Representatives. And I know we're bouncing around. I'm going to get to a point here. But there's a reason why all new taxes have to start in the House of Representatives. And that's because that was originally the only branch that was in the legislative branch, that's the only area that was directly elected by the people. So they're most accountable to the people. So these are the people that are raising your taxes. So they made that branch and the House of Representatives the ones who could only initiate new taxes. That way, they'll be held accountable to the voter. The voter can decide, hey, you know what? These are the guys who started my new taxes that I now have to pay, and I can vote them out of office. Isn't that cool? I just think that's got to be the coolest thing that our founders did, just the reasoning behind it, why it all starts in Congress. And now let's go to what we saw with Obamacare, why this relates. In Obamacare, the taxes that we now have to pay, it's written by Congress as a penalty, not a tax. It was not a tax. So as originally written, it was a penalty. Well, they don't have the authority to penalize anyone. There's nowhere in the Constitution that gives them that authority. So as we were discussing with Sheriff Mack, the judicial branch, the Supreme Court decided, you know what, I know you wrote penalty, but we're just going to call it a tax. That's what we're doing. Even though, and perhaps I'm wrong, I'm going to have to double check on this, but I believe that this started in the Senate. So if it did start in the Senate, they went about it the wrong way, because it has to start in the House of Representatives, because all new taxes must start in the House of Representatives. So this is another avenue for us to fight Obamacare itself. So with that in mind, they have very clear powers given to them. They can't pull it out of nowhere. They can't just decide that the judicial branch will make law. They can only see if the law is relevant in the eyes of the Constitution. Do they have the authority to do this? So what the Supreme Court should have done was say, nope, you don't have the authorization to penalize, and kicked it back. And Congress could have then tried again. But that's not what they did. They decided to change penalty to a tax, and they didn't have authority to do that, constitutionally speaking, let alone, the constitutional authority of the Supreme Court itself. But I digress. Anyway, as far as state rights, and we're talking about the federalization of law enforcement. So let's talk about state rights. The 10th Amendment, okay, everything not in the Constitution falls directly to the states and the people respectively. Everything. That's enumerated in the 10th Amendment. So that's Bill of Rights. That can't change, by the way. And in case you didn't know, the 17th Amendment at one point it was not there. And the Senate was actually elected by the state legislators. This gave the states a voice in government. It gave them a way to have their agendas and their voice heard. So you had the federal government's voice. You had the House of Representatives elected by the people. You had the Senate elected by the states and giving the states their voice, because if you're elected by somebody, that's who you represent. But the 17th Amendment, it created a situation now where the Senate is elected by the people as well. So now the states lost their voice. That's a major blow against state sovereignty. And again, this is really unfortunate, because checks and balances, they're so important. Our founders didn't just do these things for no reason. They did them for very specific reasons, as I just illustrated with the House of Representatives. Why new taxes must start in the House. Checks and balances. Holding people accountable. This is all extremely important. Anyway, as far as this federalization, I'm very concerned. I don't think that the feds have any business trying to get involved in local police actions or local police investigations. And I think it's also detrimental. I think that it creates a situation of where the president looks like he's almost giving a vote of no confidence to these police officers, that they're not capable of performing. And I think that the president actually believes this. I think that the president actually believes, as well as our attorney general, I believe that they think there is racism in our police departments today, and I highly doubt that. I disagree. I don't think that these situations that have been promoted in the news are actually racial. I think that they stem from a greater problem of over-policing and policing things that are not an issue. I.e., there's no victim in the crime. So, as far as Michael Brown, that was a different circumstance. But I'm going to get into a little bit about more what I'm talking about, so you guys will get an idea when we get back from this break. I really want to lay out the importance of understanding what government really is. What is government? We're going to break that down when we get back. Don't go anywhere, everybody.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LAGOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III. Stand up, speak out, and get on the move. And now your host, Mack Worley III.
Hey everybody, we are back. If you want to give me your 2 cents, hop in the conversation here, I'd be happy to have you. Feel free to give us a call. The number to the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that's 619-924-0986. Or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com, and we'll read your email live on the air. Also, don't forget to check us out on our website, onthemoveshow.com. Here at blogtalkradio.com/onthemoveshow. I would really appreciate it if you take the time to follow us on here. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/onthemoveshow. I do book reviews, gear reviews, some activism on there. I got a lot of videos. If you don't know about me personally, I was involved in a unlawful arrest. I was open carrying in Vancouver, Washington last year in June. I have a video of the encounter of the police unlawfully arresting me, so feel free to check that out. Lots of other stuff on there. Anyway, you can also check us out on our Facebook, facebook.com/onthemoveshow. You can like us on there, and you can follow us on Twitter @onthemoveshow. So, anyway, moving forward here, guys, I want to enter into the next segment. This segment of the show we like to call the Mack Attack, and it's where I report about outrageous events in the news. And today we're going to be talking about the Michael Brown situation, related to Trayvon Martin, and also talk about the Eric Garner situation as well. And I want to compare all of these, talk about how they connect, and where I stand with each one, because they're very different. Each one is a very different circumstance, but they all got a lot of attention. Okay, so I want to start at the beginning of what seems like a culmination of racial tension rising. We had President Obama come out and say that Trayvon could have been his son. And, for me, this is a really terrible thing to say from a PR standpoint. I don't believe that he should have said this. I think that it added to racial tensions. Obviously, he's claiming that Trayvon was the victim of this. We all know that Trayvon Martin died, and that is horrible. It's a tragic situation. I don't think it probably should have ended up that way. I think George Zimmerman made some very bad judgment calls. However, to illustrate that situation, we had a self-proclaimed neighborhood watchman, following around a young man that he thought was suspicious. And then when he turned around a corner following the young man, Trayvon Martin jumped out and started pummeling George Zimmerman for following him. And that's just not lawful. Somebody can follow you. It may be annoying, and they may be, it may even be racially motivated. However, George Zimmerman was played out in the media to be racist, and he shot this black young kid just because he hated black people. That was what we were told. And he was this racist white guy. Well, turns out George Zimmerman, not a white guy. He's Hispanic. And also turns out George Zimmerman actually has a photo going to some kind of dance or prom of some kind where his date was an African-American woman. So that doesn't seem to really fit the profile of a racist white man. But anyway, Trayvon Martin pins George Zimmerman on his back on the ground, and he's beating the crap out of him, MMA style, ground and pound. he's beating him up. George Zimmerman feels that his life is in jeopardy, and he shoots Trayvon Martin, which kills him. This is a situation where a civilian shoots a civilian. All right? So I think the racial tensions built up around this situation were overbuilt. I think they were too much. I don't think it was racially motivated. I think George Zimmerman made some bad judgment. He shouldn't have followed Trayvon Martin. However, Trayvon Martin did not have the right to start beating up George Zimmerman. He just didn't have the right. And I think that the jury was correct in saying that George Zimmerman was not guilty. So that's one situation. Now we have the next situation that happened that really, started heating up, and we see these protests and rioting in Ferguson. Michael Brown, he is involved in a strong-arm robbery. He then takes his cigars that he took, and he's walking down the road, and Officer Darren Wilson starts talking to him. While he's talking to him, because they were walking down the middle of the road, I believe Darren Wilson said that he was telling them to get out of the middle of the road, and he basically got blown off. While he's having this conversation, he gets a phone call over the radio with a description matching these guys involved in the strong-arm robbery, just a little bit away from where he was currently located. He looked at the hands of Michael Brown, and he saw the cigars, and he figured, hey, this is probably the guy that did it. So he tries to get out of the car, and Michael Brown punches him in the face through the window, closes the door. There was a scuffle. Apparently, the eye socket wasn't caved in, as I had last reported, so I have to correct that. I apologize. But he did, in fact, have some marks on his face, so he was at least struck. There was some kind of physical altercation, and the gun went off in the vehicle. Darren Wilson says that Michael Brown attempted to grab his gun, and that's why it went off. So he gets out of the car after Michael Brown walks away. Darren Wilson gets out of the car and he pursues. This may or may not have been the correct procedure to do. As I told you, they have no obligation to actually defend you. They have no obligation to pursue. They have no obligation to do anything except investigate the crime, because that's really what they do. They investigate crime. So I think this officer was probably mad. That's a good possibility. Either way, we can't know. But the justification for lethal force, I believe, is there. So I think he pursued because he was angry, but I think he was well within his use of force matrix of what he's allowed to do as far as when he used lethal force. So Michael Brown turned around, started charging after him. He commanded him to halt. That's what he said anyway. We don't know if that actually happened. I don't know. But then he shot at Michael Brown and did not stop shooting until the threat was eliminated, and that was because he shot Michael Brown in the top of the head. He was charging at him like a linebacker. And as I already said, your use of force matrix is pretty clear. All you have to do is be able to justify and articulate why you felt that your life was in jeopardy, why you felt that this suspect could have somehow caused serious bodily harm or death to you. That's all you have to be able to do, is to articulate that in a really convincing way. So a 292-pound man, 6'4", charging at you like a linebacker that's already punched you in the face, tried to grab your gun, and it went off in your car. It would stand to reason, pretty simply, that this man, if he tackled you, could overpower you, take your gun, and use it to kill you, which he already tried to take the gun in the first place. So, as Richard Mack once just said, just a little bit ago, 15-20% of officers are killed on duty with their own firearms. So this is a split-second decision. He had to make a decision. Is he going to do it? He did use lethal force, resulted in Michael Brown. Now we see all these people rioting. It's a race, it's a race killing. It's a cold-blooded execution in the middle of the street. I don't think so. I disagree. I don't think it had anything to do with that. But let's move forward here. Let's talk about Eric Gardner. What happened there? This situation is a bunch of police officers surrounding a man who is suspected of selling loose cigarettes. He's in New York City. He's selling these loose cigarettes. And mind you, the people who called in this complaint are black business owners, minority business owners in the area who were upset because he was selling cigarettes and it was cutting into their profits. So these minority business owners, they're doing things the lawful, legal way. They're selling cigarettes, having a tax included and all that stuff. And because somebody's standing right outside their business selling things without giving the government their cut, they called the police because it was hurting their business. They needed that business from the cigarette sales. So they call the police. They complain. Police show up. This guy's apparently been arrested, some 30 times already for the same kind of thing, nonviolent stuff. But they initially show up and he's like, look, don't touch me. Just leave me alone. Quit harassing me. I told you last time you were out here. I didn't want, I'm not selling anything. So after this, they say, okay, we're going to arrest you. Put your hands up. 2 seconds later, so Eric Gardner had 2 seconds to react after being told to put his hands up. He wasn't violent. At most, he was passive resistant, where he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he said, don't touch me. There are, in this threat level matrix, okay, there's passive resistance, where it's somebody basically being verbally defiant. That's passive resistant. Active resistant is somebody hanging on to a pole and refusing to let go, or crossing their arms and locking it in and not letting you put cuffs on them. That is active resistance. Now, when things get more physical, that becomes different threat levels, but at most, Eric Gardner was active resistant, where he may have not wanted somebody to choke him out from behind or grab his arms. But I would argue that this man was probably more than likely passive resistance, where he was just verbally defiant. 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds after being told to put his arms behind his back or his hands up, I can't remember which one it was, 2 seconds, he gets choked from behind. The officers swarm. At this point, he's got an officer having him in a chokehold. You got an officer with their knee in the back. You got officers grabbing his hands. Eric Gardner's screaming, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. A lot of officers hear that a lot when they arrest people. Apparently, this is a subject that officers are kind of jaded hearing. They don't really respond to that. From what I'm hearing, I hear that happens quite a lot. People say that, but the common thing that officers think is, hey, if you're talking, you can breathe, so you must be fine. But Eric Gardner, he's an asthmatic, and this ultimately resulted in some kind of coronary episode where he ended up, a cardiac episode where he ended up dying as a result on the ground after saying several times, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. I think this situation right here, I don't think that this was racially motivated. I will just say, I don't think this is racially motivated. Number one, the people who called in the complaint were minorities. Number two, the on-scene supervisor. Now, for those of you who aren't in law enforcement or were not in the military, the on-scene supervisor, this is the person who is basically the commander of this place, all right? Everything that's happening, that person's in charge, okay? So the commander of the whole arrest, the commander of everything in this Eric Gardner situation was a black female. A black female. So if she thought that this was somehow racially motivated, if this whole stop was something to do with race and they were being too aggressive and she thought it had something to do with race, this is the commander of the scene. Don't you think that she would stop it? Don't you think that she would have the ability to say, hey, no, we're not doing that? Of course she would. And of course she could. She has the total authority at the scene. So I don't think this is racially motivated. But what I will say is that this is an epic example of the police state. This is an epic example of over-policing. Why was Eric Gardner killed? Why was he killed? Because as far as everyone was concerned in the situation, there was literally no victim. No victim at all. I mean, you could argue that the victim were the business owners who were in there selling things according to the law, but that's not a real victim. You have to be able to prove how they were, hurt. I guess you could say monetarily hurt because they're losing business, but I don't think that's quite good enough for this response anyway. Point being, the real victim in this situation was the government. The government didn't get their money. They didn't get their cut. And because of that, they had to come down on this guy. They can't just let this go unpunished. But I don't think that's what the officers are thinking out there. I don't think that the officers think that there's some kind of kill squad. I don't think that they're thinking that they're doing this for taxes. They're just enforcing laws. So I think one thing that we really need to understand, what is government? What exactly is the government? Force. The government is a monopoly on force. Every law that is passed, every single one of them, from the stupid laws that say you have to have a rabies shot for your dog all the time, or all the way up to not murdering anyone, murder laws. Every single one of them can result, when it comes to it, in somebody being killed. This is the perfect illustration. This Eric Gardner situation. This man was killed in a victimless crime for not giving the government their tax money. This is it. That was why this man was killed. Government is force. Government is a monopoly on force. And, people are so tempted to say that there should be a law against that. There should be a law against this. There should be a law against all of these things that offends me. There should be a law. Well, I think the Eric Gardner situation is a perfect example of why this path will lead us to disaster. People will get caught up. People will be killed. And you have to ask yourself, should this law be created if it kills people? If somebody decides, or many people decide, to violate this law, or maybe they weren't even violating the law, because for all we know, Eric Gardner wasn't even selling cigarettes. He never went to trial. He was never proven to be guilty. So he was killed for a crime that he was suspected of, not convicted of. These officers are not the judge. These officers are not the jury, and they are certainly not the executioner, though I don't think this was an intentional homicide. I think it was an accidental homicide, even though the level of force was not needed. He was being compliant, at least physically, passive resistant, and there was no need to get to that level of force immediately. But that's what the government does. The government only knows how to respond with force. They coerce you. They force you to do everything. So this man was literally killed in the street for not giving the government their cut. And I want to talk a little bit about a speech that I happened to be at where Gary Johnson was speaking. It was at the Libertarian Party of Washington convention in Seattle. I believe it was, I think it was last year, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe it was this year. Actually, you know what? I think it was this year. So anyway, he was talking, Gary Johnson, if you don't know who he is, he's former governor, and I believe he's New Mexico, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyway, Libertarian. I really love a lot of his policies, not all of them. I disagree with some things, but he vetoed so many laws. And I think this is an important story. I'm going to go ahead and retell the story. I'll give you the Cliff Note version of it, basically, that he told in the speech. He was talking about how somebody came up to him and proposed a law. It came across his desk, and it was basically a law that pet stores would have to exercise their animals. All right, so a dog, for example, would have to be taken on a certain amount of walks per day according to the law. And he said, "Oh wow, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. You'd have dogs that are in really good shape. That's good, and they'd be healthy. And, people would like to buy those dogs. But who's going to enforce this law? Are we going to have some kind of animal, exercise team that's going to come around and make sure that people are exercising their animals? Who's going to enforce this? What kind of additional resources are we now going to need for enforcing this pet exercise law? How many departments will have to be created? What bureaucracy will have to be created for this? And additionally, who will be killed for not obeying this law? Because every single law, when it comes down to it, somebody could die. So is it worth it to have these pets exercised for the possibility of somebody dying? I would argue no, and so did Gary Johnson. He vetoed it. And obviously, let's talk about free market principles. You know, if somebody has better dogs and they're in a pet store and you know that these dogs are well exercised, then you'll buy that dog over the fat dogs that don't get any exercise and that are unhealthy and they run, you know, maybe a dirty store or something like that. These are all free market principles. The people will go to the place that has the best product. So it behooves the pet store to make these decisions themselves. It shouldn't be on the government to force these stores to do the right thing. The stores will figure out what the right thing is based on the will of their customers. So, now that we understand that principle, you know, we got about 8 minutes left in the show here. I want to cover another thing here. And before I do, actually, I want to lead into something I feel is important to talk about. On Saturday, December 13th, at 11 a.m., I'm going to be at the Capitol in Olympia. If you guys are there, please stop by and say hey to me. I'll be around. So search me out. I know there's going to be like 6,000 to 7,000 people in the crowd or whatever, but if you see me, feel free to come up to me, say hey, I'd like to get to know you guys. Olympia, Washington, 11 a.m., December 13th. I will be at the I Will Not Comply rally. It is in opposition to I-594. What I would like to say is that, and I've said this before, but I hope that we can all learn from the violence, the disrespect for property rights and individual rights that we're seeing from these rioters in Ferguson and all over the country. I hope that we can learn from these lessons, and please, I'm pleading for peace. I'm urging for nonviolence. I hope that you will all take that to heart. We want to be like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., or at least I want to be, and I hope you guys do too, as opposed to the Black Panthers. Because essentially civil rights movements, and that's what this is, we are in a civil rights movement. Civil rights movements are essentially PR campaigns, and the reason why Dr. King was so effective was because he had on television where now it was entering into Americans' homes, where black Americans were being sprayed with water cannons, attacked with dogs, beaten with batons. All of that is injustice, and the American people saw this injustice afflicted on non-violent protesters, not thugs, not people out there destroying other people's property, rioting, shutting down bridges, shutting down tunnels, shutting down highways. I think this is a topic that I want to address for a second here. The left is actually involved right now in trying to change through media the definitions of protest and riot. Those are two substantially different things. A riot involves looting, violating laws just to create chaos, and that's what we see in these places. This is not civil disobedience. Civil disobedience would be to precisely target a specific law, i.e., this rally against I-594, where people will actually be swapping firearms there, an act of civil disobedience against this law. These people shutting down tunnels and highways, what law are they practicing civil disobedience against? They're not. They are angry about an action from police officers, specific events, which it's not necessary to violate the law in that case. You can protest. You have your right to free speech. Protest. Use your voice. But you don't have to go out and violate others' individual rights in the process. Nonviolence is the answer. This is the difference between the Black Panthers, which is what we're seeing in Ferguson and through these rioters and looters, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is the difference. You got to ask yourself, who do you want to be? I personally want to be nonviolent, and I will be. I don't care what is inflicted upon me at this rally. If I'm pepper sprayed, if I'm sprayed with a hose, attacked by a dog, I'm not going to be violent. I don't care. I won't. And I hope that you won't either. The last subject that I want to really cover here, we got 4 minutes and 20 seconds left in the show, is police being held to account to the same standards as the citizens. So police, as of right now, they have these special privileges, and like in some cases they can carry guns in gun-free zones. Additionally, they have more protection under the law against some kind of incident where they may have killed somebody. And they're just let off scot-free in some cases. If you can't prove intentional murder, in a lot of cases they may just be fired. But there are some cases that they should be prosecuted for involuntary manslaughter. And just in general, let's just talk about the concept here. You know, these people, police officers and other public officials, they're public servants. And that means that they're just that. They're servants. Who are their masters? We, the people. So, since when do servants have more privileges, more rights, and more protection than their masters? Why do police have special rights? Why do they have special protections? I think that they should be held to the same accountability standards as we are. That's just my personal opinion. I know a lot of people think that it would result in less people joining the police force. It would result in the police not showing up when you need them, blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? I'm here to tell you that the police, they don't have a duty or an obligation to protect you. Their job is to show up and investigate afterwards. So before we go here, I want to cut into a little segment here that we just started a little while ago. I don't have a lot of time, 2 minutes and 30 seconds here. I want to get into some of the things that we have. We got a post that we created. Post your favorite historical quote using the hashtag OMHistoryQuote. Tell us why you could be on our show. We got Mark. He said, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. Kimberly said, come on, make my day. Stephen said, liberty means to be unrestrained in the exercise of my God-given rights. Scott said, in 2 million years, will people remember us as traitors or heroes? That is the question we must ask. That's Benjamin Franklin in a letter to Thomas Jefferson, March 16, 1775. Tony says, a person convicted against their will is of the same opinion still. And my personal favorite quote, you guys may have figured this out by now, but it's a quote from Benjamin Franklin. Those who would sacrifice a little liberty to gain a little security deserve neither and will lose both. Anyway, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in today. I want to thank you guys, members of the Mack Pack. Thank you for tuning in week after week. We appreciate your continued support. Also, I want to thank Sheriff Richard Mack for joining us today. If you guys could, please go to cspoa.org, check out their website, donate, join, get involved, get on the move. Anyway, don't forget to tune in next week, guys. We'll be on at Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can always check us out at OnTheMoveShow.com, here at blogtalkradio.com/OnTheMoveShow, Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow, and YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. Oh, also on Twitter.com/OnTheMoveShow. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, get on the move.